Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Luke.
Um, I've spent the last few days reading a book. It's very exciting, but it also made me very uncomfortable in a lot of ways. I don't
Yep.
know
Gotten there.
if I had to sum it up, and there's probably plenty of ways you could sum it up, but it seems like kind of a battle with the need for external validation. I don't know if that aligns with you, but
Yeah.
I guess I just one thing that resonated with me. I think you started to talk about this early in the book was the difference between experience hunting and trophy bagging.
Yeah.
Maybe you could start by talking about the difference between those two and what that means to you.
Sure. And that was something that took a little while. I didn't just all of a sudden have that epiphany. But the difference between experience hunting and trophy bagging is doing things for the sake of the experience versus just the trophy at the end of the experience, right? Am I doing something so I can, if I'm doing something hard so I can say I did something hard, and am I doing something hard so I can do something hard? The experience of the act of engaging with the experience. That stemmed from a lot of, I was a big adventure sports enthusiast and competitor. And originally when I got into these sports like rock climbing and ropeless rock climbing and base jumping and such, it was about doing them so I could tell people I did them as a very young man, like my early 20s when I was full of bravado. And as I got older, I started understanding the difference that I wanted to engage with them so I could feel the fear, so I could feel the experience itself. And originally I had thought that fear and risk and things that prevented me from going forward, I used to see them as obstacles. And as I got older, I realized that the experience was better because of those things, not in spite of them. So experience hunting is sort of embracing all the obstacles and emotions that go around intense experiences rather than just trying to stand on top of the mountain or finish whatever it is you're trying to do or whatever it is that your goal is. The journey, right? They say the journey is more important than the end result. That's sort of the loose translation of it.
Yeah, it's something I battle with constantly, right? Like, and I catch myself constantly thinking I want to do this because that, like, for the external validation, like I catch
Right.
myself thinking about the glory of once I've done this, what people will think of me. Maybe go a bit further into like the fear and I can't remember what else you said, like how that actually makes the experience better. What do you mean by that?
So certainly with some of the sports I participated in, like free soloing, rock climbing, I used to think there was something wrong with me because I had that fear. Like, oh, there are climbers who are stronger than me mentally, and they don't have fear, and that's actually bullshit. It's all about how we manage fear, and as we get more experience and as we get deeper into the experiences that we are participating in, we start understanding our body's response to the fear, and managing that fear becomes an unbelievably powerful experience to get through something because you kept the fear and you kept your mental state. I call it the climber's mindset in the book. The way to stay focused and be able to execute, make good decisions, be them physical decisions, be them mental decisions in the present rather than worrying about a future. That fear is, oh, if I fall, I'm going to die, or if something else, any negative outcome fantasy. That's where being able to control those emotions creates an elevation to your experience I mean, it's like being on drugs.
Do you still catch yourself trophy bagging at times?
Absolutely. It's an ongoing battle. To always like, wait, am I doing this for the external validation or am I doing this because I want to do it? I want to experience it. And certainly with the advent of social media, that I think it is sort of trophy bagging on steroids. And that's one of the things I don't engage in social media actually to make sure that I'm not doing something so I can say, oh, look at me, right? I want validation from people, even though when I certainly started out in a lot of the more adventurous things I did, I was definitely looking for external validation and using them as a story that I told myself about who I was.
Do you think at the core of that trophy bagging, it's like, this is something I struggle with, right? Like, it's like, I feel that if people will like me, then I'll be happy. And then you just go into these cycles of trying to impress people, right? Like, this is something yeah. Where was I going with that? Yeah, I don't know. Look, I struggled a lot when I was younger. Like, I did some extreme sports and stuff like that. Did a little bit of skydiving, a little bit of free diving. Nothing as extreme as you. But I feel like recently, like, I've like sorry, I'm having a mind blank.
No problem. My brain's kind of mushed too
Yeah,
today.
yeah. Do you think modern culture rewards trophy bagging more than general experience?
I would, that's a really interesting question, and I hadn't really thought about it before, but I think so, and I think that's where the social media component comes in. It really rewards the trophy, right? It rewards the look at me. It rewards the number of likes. It rewards that I call the second party validation, and doing things because you enjoy them, and just doing them for the inward satisfaction. That's it. Like you said, it's an ongoing struggle. It's always there. There's a piece of you that's always performative. And I try to get away from that, and I've done a good job, but I'm human. I fall down.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've been, what I was trying to get at before is, I think I've been kind of trying to live in a performative ways, and I don't know, I've constantly tried to live a life in the need for external validation. And I think, I don't know, I found myself in a period now where I've kind of got rid of a lot of those desires for external validation. And I almost have this feeling of like emptiness, right? Like, it was like I needed, it's like now I don't have a drive. Maybe if we could talk more about seeking the edge of experience.
Exactly. I mean, so the title of the book, "Seek the Risk," it's part of a longer "Seek the Risk, Not the Reward," which is sort of the same thing as experience hunting versus trophy bagging. It's just a little more eloquent. So what I have found in my life is when I have an aversion, like, something scares me, or I slightly aversion, or I'm worried, that usually that's an indication that there's something to be learned there about myself. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes you're afraid of things because you should be. Like, I'm afraid of jumping in front of a train because for obvious reasons. But with social situations and certainly with adventures and such, by pushing myself past the edge, and I don't mean like way past the edge, I mean just a little past the edge, wherever your edges of comfort are, get out of your comfort zone. And when you're out of your comfort zone, all kinds of things come up, and you learn stuff about yourself. So I think there's a line in the book, I've dedicated myself to trying to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because as humans, we really do like to stay in our comfort zone. It's just safe, it's nice, it's good.
Yeah.
But I find I don't learn as much about myself in the comfort zone as I do when I'm outside, when I'm on the edge, when I'm pushed, when buttons are being pushed, when I kind of don't know what's going on, because that's where the learning is, which, in the story of the book, as you know, kind of delves into that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's also like an unapologetically constantly, I guess, living out a sense of hedonism. I don't know whether that word resonates with you or not, but I think from my younger years, I have such a negative connotation towards seeking the edge, because in my younger years that turned into a lot of chaotic behavior around like drug use and getting myself in, trouble in all sorts of ways, shapes or forms. Like, how do you feel about like the healthy side of that versus the dark side of that?
Yeah, listen, absolutely. Everything has, can you do it for the right reasons or the wrong reasons? And we certainly, we have to make mistakes in our life, right? I certainly went overboard with drugs and alcohol at times in my life. And I'm not suggesting people do that, but I certainly learned a lot about myself and about how I wanted to actually live and how I don't want to live. And, those, like I said, I'm not recommending that, but And also it wasn't that's a little different because that wasn't scary. Drug use and alcohol wasn't scary. It was just pure fun. It wasn't anything I was like, ooh, I don't know what to do. I was like, no, let's go. Let's have a good time. I'm talking about things that is outside our comfort zone in terms of, maybe a social situation or maybe a business situation or maybe even an athletic situation. Things where our brain's telling us, no, 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 stay here. Don't go push yourself. You might fail. You might, or who knows what. So I think it's a little bit of a different situation than the, like as young men, the partying that we did, right? I wouldn't put them in the same boat.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that helps, right? Because I think I developed this connotation of like seeking the edge in connection to negative, extreme behavior, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about here.
No, it's not what we're talking about at all. Because I've been there too. I'm literally talking about the edge of your comfort zone, whatever that is. Everyone's got their own everyone's got their own comfort zone, and a lot of people who have read the book and said, well, you're far, that's really the edge. I'm like, my edge is my edge. There's people who make my edge look safe, right? Just because your edge is different than mine, it doesn't mean it's not scary to go over. We all have the edges. We all have our comfort zone, and we all have to feel good when we go beyond that comfort zone, because that's not easy to do. And most people don't do it. That's what I've seen. And when you do it, it feels good. And I'm not saying always do it, right? Like you can't live that way all the time. But if you do it with some regularity, you start really sinking into the experience. And for me, my life satisfaction just really elevated when I started pushing myself. I had a lot of failures, but I had some unbelievable successes. And the successes really stay with you when you are actively pushing yourself and working through problems. Like that success, that high lasts a very long time. Way more than any second party validation from being able to say, oh, I did this or whatever.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Because like I said to you earlier, like I felt very uncomfortable in a lot of places in the book because you were really pushing to the edge. And a lot of the times I felt myself asking, like, this just seems, and I feel like I'm dancing around because I'm a bit uncomfortable talking about
You are
this
dancing.
stuff.
I know you're dancing around it.
I know. But like, the non-monogamy, the sexual stuff, it a lot of it felt, and you can dive into this however you want, but a lot of it felt like just basically you pushing through, and almost to the point of torturing yourself. And I get it, pushing out of your comfort zones in some of the extreme sports and stuff like that, but it actually felt like almost self-torture in a way.
You're not the first person who has said that. And there certainly was an element of what you're talking about, but it wasn't certainly the driving force due to like all the mountain climbing and stuff. There's an element of suffering in a lot of the things I had done. And that's why I started drawing the parallels between this non-monogamous relationship and the climbing, is because there were a lot of parallels in terms of learning and sort of trying to achieve something and having to suffer along the way. But at no point was I doing it to myself just for the pain. I was really curious because I'd never experienced anything like that before, and I was really curious about it. It scared the hell out of me, and one of the reasons I kept going in the relationship in the book is because if I was going to say no to the relationship, I wanted to make sure I said no because I knew it wasn't for me, not just because I was scared to find out, because it was terrifying. I mean, that's why I chose the non-monogamous relationship as the vehicle for the book. Was like, this was terrifying, but in the end, I want to make sure. I just wanted to really try and find out what was on the other side. And I just learned so much about myself by continually pushing myself. And I'm not like the person I got involved with was an extreme example of that type of relationship, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody. But I went into it with a lot of bravado from all the sports, like all the stuff I had learned from all the sports I had done. I felt invincible in a lot of ways. Like, I'm this strong man. I've beaten my demons, and I couldn't have been more wrong. The non-monogamous relationship showed me a side of myself I didn't even know was there. And it was terrifying at first, but in the end, it was a beautiful thing. And I learned, like I said, I came out the other side a fantastically better version of myself. And I had a feeling that's what would happen, which is why I kept going.
Yeah. God, I'm so uncomfortable. I'm struggling to like ask the questions I told myself I was going to ask you.
Well, you can ask him. It's all right, man. I
Sure,
put
sure.
this out there.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, like, it's funny, right? Because when you're talking about the extreme sports stuff, like that stuff really excites me, and I get how you can grow from that. Now, we're beating around the bush, but what I'm asking you about is you're in a non-monogamous relationship and speaking to your partner about them having relations with other people, however you want to put it, and and that just makes me so uncomfortable. What do you think that discomfort, I guess, taught you or is trying to teach us? Or what did you learn from sitting with that discomfort?
Well, what I learned was where the discomfort was coming from, right? I mean, so I'll back up a little bit and give your listeners just a slight little bit of background on why this matters to the trophy bagging versus experience hunting. Is I met this woman who was like the absolute, just, basically supermodel gorgeous, absolutely stunningly brilliant, getting a PhD from an Ivy League, spoke 5 languages, super outgoing. I mean, was the absolutely trophy girlfriend. Right. And I met her and I was totally taken with her and we started hooking up and such. And then it turns out she has this total other side where she's into the wild underground sexual world of New York City and very non-monogamous lifestyle and such. But also very public about it. She's a sex educator. And so her persona was she was out there with her megaphone about her sexual exploits. And when we started connecting and I started falling for her, when this became apparent, I was like, wait a second, and then I realized I was trophy bagging in terms of finding her. And now all of a sudden there was this experience of getting into this relationship in a way I'd never even considered really being in a relationship before. And so that's how the whole experience hunting versus trophy bagging thing started. And I was like, okay, Adam, you have spent your life now talking this talk. Here is a way to walk the walk and see if you really are an experience hunter or a trophy bagger. So that was the challenge I gave to myself. Because I was falling in love with the woman. She's an incredible. We had a great relationship. We got married, but I had to say, all right, I will try doing this, and I did it with baby steps. I mean, the book lines out these baby steps that we did before I got fully comfortable with her lifestyle. What I learned about myself, the first thing I learned is how much I was using second party validation about me, my own masculinity and and how it related to my heterosexuality. I could not, it was incredible that once it all came out, the kind of relationship we have, because it's very public, my value as a man in other people's eyes went to nothing. Her value as a woman in my friends and family's eyes went to nothing. All of a sudden, I was a weak man. I was nothing. It was quite mind opening. And, so that was the first lessons I had to realize, wow, I'm still doing second party validation, but around my relationship, I never even knew that. So that was the first lesson, and I had to relearn. Then I had to relearn about masculinity. I was still using so many second party validation markers for my own masculinity instead of looking inside me. So that was another great outcome of the relationship. And jealousy, learning all of a sudden being confronted with jealousy. I'd never been confronted with it like that before. And that was, it takes you down until you try and figure out where it's coming from. Because she was crazy about me. She loved me. We got married. It was amazing. She just also liked to be with other men. And that it took me a long time to wrap my brain around it. But in the end, I understand. I came to understand the real strong emotional reactions I had were due to just not believing in myself and realizing that I was looking to female attention as a way to validate myself and my own masculinity. Spoiler alert, in the end, I decided I didn't want that relationship. But we were together 10 years. And at the end, we decided, okay, this isn't for me. But it was an unbelievable experience. And I came out the other side a like I said, a fantastically better version of myself. But the book chronicles that whole journey, the ups, the downs, the laying on the floor, just broken as a man,
Uh,
and then
and
coming
that's what
back
I
from
mean.
it.
It sounded like you would. It just sounded like punishment the whole time. It sounded so brutal, and maybe the trophy bagging versus experience hunting is very interesting because in some ways you were having these peak experience, I guess, from
Yeah,
a relationship point of view, but you're also having these peak negative experiences, but
absolutely.
you were seeing the peak negative experiences as invalid because they were based on other people's expectations of what the relationship should be.
I wouldn't say they were invalid. The responses were real, but I started to understand why I was having the responses I was having, because I was basing so much on other people, and when that was stripped away, and I let go of that, it caused so much introspection and so much looking inward that I don't think I could have achieved that any other way. Yeah, it was. I mean, it's a pretty sharp knife, non-monogamy. It cuts
Yeah,
deep,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it exposed a lot of stuff inside me. I mean, I'm a fairly introspective person, and I think you kind of need to be to go through something like that. Otherwise, it's all going to be. But I knew there were lessons I wanted to learn here, and so that's what kept me going. It wasn't just pain for pain. It was there are lessons I want to learn, and the reality was that a lot of the relationship was fantastic. It was incredible. Like we just had the best time. And I mean, I'm someone who has enjoyed fun sexual experiences, and the sexual experiences I got to have during this relationship were mind blowing as well. So I knew there was an element of me that wanted to be here. I just didn't, I was I didn't know how to get there. So I just started methodically attacking it like I had attacked
Yeah.
any of the sports that I did. And which is, yeah, I had told a friend of mine the whole story. He's like, dude, you have to write this down. It's amazing.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm twisting myself in knots as we speak, right? Like, so do you think um, jealousy is always an expression of the need for external validation?
No, no. I actually don't think jealousy has much to do with external validation. I think um, jealousy is around feeling you may lose what you have. I think that's that. I think that's where jealousy is.
Okay.
Um, the masculinity component was the external validation, the how I'm seeing as a strong person or man. I guess it really ties back to masculinity. That was where all the external validation was. And did people like me? Like all people would initially when it all happened, I was judged incredibly harshly by people I care a lot about, and that was difficult. But they came on a journey too, and they actually. It was funny with my best friends when I first did it. He was judged me so harshly, but in the end, at the end of the 10 years later, he was like, "You are a far stronger man than I. I don't know. That was amazing to watch how you handled yourself and how you moved through it, and that felt great." And I guess
Yeah.
that is kind of second party validation, but it was just recognizing the effort I had put through and all the struggles I had been through, the experience that I had gained, and that felt great.
So what version of masculinity do you think was dismantled, and then what is your version of masculinity now?
Well, I don't know if it's a version as much as it is what does it mean? Well, what does masculinity mean? I was asking myself that question a lot, especially when when people were calling me a cuckold, right? Oh, he's controlled by his woman, and all of a sudden that to me was like sort of the worst insult. And I was surprised by how much that hurt, how much when people thought I was a weak man, how much that hurt. And so I was like, okay, so I'm basing my masculinity, or I had been basing so much of how I thought about my masculinity on what other people thought about my masculinity. And when that was gone, I'd say, okay, well, what does masculinity mean to me? And to me, being a man is being the protector, is being someone people can count on. I can be a shoulder to cry on, or I can be a fist to protect you. I think masculinity has a real strength component, physical strength as well as emotional strength. And I started looking at how I behaved to the outside world. I was like, to me, masculinity meant being the kind of man that people wanted around, that they felt that's a kind of either a role model or a protector or just a good, great guy to have around because he's always going to do the right thing, right? And that's my masculinity now is based on how I present to how I engage with the outside world, not how I want the outside world to see me. I enjoy being a protector. I enjoy being the breadwinner. I enjoy being strong. I enjoy protecting those who can't protect themselves. Like these are all the things to me that I want my masculinity to be based on. I'm not saying someone else may have a different list, but decide internally and at no point should it be, I want my masculinity to be based on how that guy thinks of me, right? I don't, no, this is how I'm going to behave. And if I do it right, then I'll attract the kind of people I want to attract.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the start, where a lot of it for me just came down to, the battle against the need for external validation.
Yeah. I think as young men, we all go through that. I don't think you and I are different than most of the other guys out there.
Look, did you expect people to be so uncomfortable when reading the book? And I guess how uncomfortable was it for actually writing it and working through a lot of these and talking about it publicly?
It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, actually. Writing it all because I'm a journal. I journal, so I had notes throughout. And then after the relationship ended, the pandemic hit, and I was like, oh, I got some time. And a friend told me it was a great story, so I started writing. Initially, I started to dance. I was dancing around a lot of the uncomfortable topics and a lot of the uncomfortable feelings. And as I got into it, I had a friend who was a writer, and he helped me. He coached me through it, and he kept saying, "Push harder. The deeper you go into your own psyche, the better it's going to be." And that was terrifying me. I don't know how far you've gotten through the book, but I open up some deeply scary and embarrassing stuff about what I was thinking and feeling. But I have had so many readers thank me for that. Other men, even women. It's like, it's nice to hear a man who actually is in touch with what he's feeling, and other men who have emailed me and said, my God, thank you. I thought I was the only one who felt this way. And so it has been an incredibly positive experience. It was very freeing to write it all down like that. I generally am not an open person, so it was doubly. But again, the writing of the book is almost the exact same modus operandi of the experience hunting versus the trophy bagging. Oh, I want to have a popular book. Well, okay, no. Or do you want the experience of writing the book was really where the value was. And now I do have a book, and that's great. So there is a trophy, but it was really the experience of getting there. Yeah. That was the real trophy.
Yeah. What do you think so I think vulnerability gives other people the permission to think it's okay to be vulnerable. And I guess why do you think so many men are uncomfortable with being vulnerable and speaking the way you speak in the book?
Yeah. And again, I was one of those uncomfortable people too. And I just, like I said, through a lot of prodding, I got through it. I think, certainly there's a lot of societal pressure on men to be tough. Don't cry. You have to always have this persona of stoicism. Certainly, I'm a little older than you, and I grew up in America, and that certainly was pervasive in the culture I grew up in. And certainly when I went into the competitive sports world, there was still all that bravado. I'm going to be tough. I'm not going to show feelings. I'm not going to show fear. I'm just going to present this fake person almost. And why that is, I don't know. It's certainly something that has been pervasive in our culture, but I don't know the reasons as to why. It's funny in the book, I talk about this spectrum of really like a really sensitive guy versus a really tough guy, or like toxic masculinity versus bland masculinity. And both ends of that spectrum have valuable qualities, but they're in the extreme, they're both awful, right? So we want to be somewhere in the middle where we have some sensitivity and we have some toughness, but we have a perfect, finding that elusive perfect blend of knowing when to be sensitive and when to be tough. And I think understanding that balance is a large part for me what it means to be a masculine man.
In the book, you talk a lot about, I guess, the fear of your partner being public about, or your wife, I should say, being public about having sex with a bunch of other men. And I guess you talk about kind of the emotional pain going through at every stage of when that's going public, right? Like you talk about on Facebook and you know, with friends and all that kind of stuff. What was worse, the initial fear or the actual backlash? Was it all in your head? What was, like, when you actually had to see people, was it as bad as the fear leading up to it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And so there's a number of points there. Certainly there was, I talk about in the book on Facebook when she came out as being in an open relationship with me. And that was terrifying because I didn't know what was going to happen. And when that happened, then my world kind of collapsed initially, and a lot of people judged, and everyone I met, the first, anyone who knew me was like, "So you're in an open relationship?" Or like, "Wow, your wife or girlfriend's having sex with him?" Like, it was just, that was all people could talk about. It was so beyond their understanding. So that was, there was fear, and it was difficult, but then actually having to live it. Like, there was one thing, it's like I got through that initial judgment zone of the first 6 months when everyone was just aghast, and then finally everyone got bored and moved on. So that was fine. But then I was living in this relationship where she was having sex with other people while I traveled for work. And that was far harder, trying to come to grips with that and trying to understand that. And because initially I didn't want to know about it. I was like, listen, you do whatever you want while I'm away. I don't want to know about it. I'm going to stay off I was on social media back then. I'm going to stay off social media. I don't want to know anything about it. So I was sort of like pretending it wasn't happening. But eventually she was like, look, this is who I am. And if we're together, I'm your freaking wife, for God's sakes. You need to know all of me. You have to accept me as I am. And she was right. And so I was like, okay, yeah. So slowly we started to open up, and like our communication started opening up, and I started hearing about her exploits. And that's the meat of the book, was me trying to come to grips with that. What's that?
You said she was right. Why was she right? Why did you need to know?
Because, well, a couple things. And I needed to know. She needed me to know. Does one need to know? I'm not saying everyone has their own relationship. I'm not saying everyone has to know. But in that situation, I did, because to her, it was such an integral part of who she was. She was a very sexually forward person. That was part of who she was. And here is the man she's living with, and I'm trying to pretend that it's not happening. And she's like, look, if you want to be with me, you have to be with all of me. Right. And if you're living a lie, if you pretend this is not who I am. So that's why. And in all fairness, once, it was quite a process, but once I got through it, we were far closer than we had been before. So that's what I mean by saying she was right. Now, I'm not saying she's right that is right for every relationship, but in this particular case, she was right. I needed to be with all of her. I need to accept all of her if I was going to be married to this woman.
So what growth do you think you got out of the whole experience?
Well, I I am defining my masculinity not by what anyone else thinks about my relationship or by my partner. And I have turned the gaze inward about my behavior and who I am and how I want to present to the world, and that's been great. I also, it's funny, someone read the book and said to me, it's funny, you got into this relationship to fall in love with a girl, but it seems you fell in love with yourself. And that's a very accurate description of the book. I don't know if you've gotten to the end, but the whole end is about me really, recognizing how I'd grown, how I'd matured, how I'd started seeing what a wonderful person I am. And I stopped looking at all these external markers in the relationship category. So I also found out that I don't want this crazy non-monogamous relationship. It's one of those things that it's out there and you think about it. Always thought about it as a man, thinking about, wow, it'd be great to have a bunch of sexual partners. But the reality is, you know what? I did that. It was okay. But now I know the relationship I want is much more centered on one person. So that was a great piece of growth. I started understanding that things like jealousy, a little bit of jealousy can be a good thing. It can motivate you to be a better partner. Because I see so many people in these long-term relationships that aren't pushing themselves. And I don't mean you have to push yourselves with non-monogamy, but the relationship should have a little risk in it, I think. And it doesn't mean it has to be non-monogamous risk, but the relationship should have a little risk to keep things fresh, to keep people engaged. And certainly my parents went through a relationship where they were just tired of each other by the time, they got to the end of their marriage. And I don't ever want
a relationship. What do you mean by that? A relationship that needs to be a little bit of risk?
I think by adding a little bit of risk to our lives, we just keep ourselves we keep ourselves engaged with the situation more. If it's too comfortable all of the time, at least for me, and again, everyone's different. I'm not suggesting that everyone follow this. I feel that when I'm in a relationship, I need a little bit of edge to it in order to stay engaged, a little bit of spice, whatever that means. It can mean anything. It doesn't have to be non-monogamy. As someone, I'm an adventure seeker, so obviously I'm going to need a little bit more adventure than maybe someone who's less adventurous. And there's no judgment there. We all have our edge. Find yours and push it. That's what I say.
So what does living on the edge mean to you now? I mean, you're obviously out of this relationship.
Yes.
I don't know how much.
But we're the best of friends. We're the best of friends. I want to be clear. It all ended well and lovely, and we're very close. I'm at a point in my life now where I'm here in Australia right now on a little surfing trip, trying to push myself there. So that's how I'm kind of taking a little risk right now. I still do a lot of snowboarding. Up in Colorado, where I have a place. My close friends and we do a lot of backcountry snowboarding, exploring. I am trying to learn to play a musical instrument. I have taken up guitar, and I performed live for the first time about 3 weeks ago at a bar in New York City. So, and that was one of the most terrifying things I'd ever done. It was, and so I keep pushing my edges. I keep trying to grow. I keep trying to learn new things. So that's kind of right now. And I'm actively looking for a new relationship that could be the next big adventure. I don't know what that relationship would look like. I've had a few since the book, but at the moment I'm single. So.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting, right? Like, I feel like I had a kind of life of extremes when I was younger. Like I said, there was a little bit of extreme sports, and that ended up leading to a lot of drug use, alcohol use, all that kind of stuff. And then I kind of went into this, I think you've had a similar experience where I went into this kind of obsession with business, growth. And I think I kind of said, like I said, I saw all this like pushing to the edge, like, I don't know. I think I saw it as like some sort of escapism, and I think my life's turned into a bit too, I don't know, vanilla and plain. So I think I need to find my own version of seeking the edge.
Yeah, it can mean who knows what it is for you, but yeah, I encourage you to find an edge, and push on it a little bit. See what happens.
Yeah.
I mean, the great thing about pushing on a little, you go over, you can decide, no, that wasn't for me. It happens in the book a couple of times. Go like, nah, it's not for me. So push on it. If that doesn't work, try something else. But I hear you on the vanilla life. It's like, no, you don't. You want something that keeps your mind engaged, keeps your excitement, your arousal level. And I don't mean sexual arousal. I just mean your arousal for life. You want things that keep that arousal level up. Yeah. And we did it with drugs and alcohol. I did. Sounds like you did too. We did it with drugs and alcohol a lot when we were young men. But that's because that's easy. That's an easy way, right? It's just, you start drinking, whatever. That's too easy. If I'm going to push my edge, I want it to take effort.
So what does that look like from a practical level, I guess? Find something that scares you. move towards it?
I mean, it can be. It doesn't. I don't know if it's scary as much as it could just be super challenging, right? I mean, the whole instrument thing, the performing was terrifying, but the learning was just challenging. But then I said I would like to get good enough to start playing in front of people, but that's where the fear came in. Otherwise, it was just very challenging trying to get proficient at an instrument. I mean, I'm not that I'm proficient now. I still have a long way to go, but it's now I did it. I performed once. Hopefully, I'll perform again here soon. So that's me pushing on my edge. And writing was me pushing. Writing the book was the first way I decided, I'm going to start looking at artistic endeavors. That was me pushing on my edge. And I've really enjoyed the writing. And I'm still doing it. I'd like to, I'm working on another book now, has nothing to do with relationships or non-monogamy, but has to do with friendship. So.
Awesome. All right, Adam. Well, yeah, look, thanks for coming on. I feel like as soon as we started talking, I started thinking about the book and I just started sketching out about all the questions I was going to ask.
Please, it's all right, man. I wrote the book too. I've done a lot of interviews. There's a lot. Some people are super uncomfortable with it, but they said, they thought it was a good story. They thought it was well written, and I like that. And other people just absolutely loved it. So it's I've seen the entire gambit. I'm glad to hear you reading it, though. I'd love to hear that. I'd love to hear if you ever want to talk about what the uncomfortable bits are. I'm happy to chat.
Well, look, I mean, I'd love to kind of figure out why I'm so uncomfortable with it, right? And I think
why
it
do you
does lean
think?
back. Oh, I don't know. I think maybe I have a level of shame when it comes to speaking about sexuality and stuff like that. And to be honest, it probably there's a lot that probably links back to my own views on masculinity as well, right? And I think, or I don't know, maybe there's part of my conservative nature coming out, like this is not something that should be spoken about, right? And then when I'm reading the book, it's fine, and when I'm writing the questions, but as soon as we start talking, I go, oh shit, everyone's going to hear this and freak out. Which is
you should push your edge. What's the most embarrassing question you have?
I mean, I probably could. What have I got? Okay. Do you personally believe, this is a good question actually, do you personally believe non-monogamy is conducive to long-term happiness?
I do not believe it's conducive or not conducive. I think that each individual is different, and that for the right people, I think that it can be conducive to long-term happiness. For the right people, monogamy can be conducive to long-term happiness. I think you need to find the kind of relationship that sits with who you are, with your core values. But interestingly, Jane she's a sex scientist. She is currently writing a book about helping people trying to find what relationship style makes sense for them, be it totally monogamous or totally non-monogamous and everything in between. So long-term happiness is, in my opinion, and in conversations I've had with a lot of people, long-term happiness is based on being in the situation that best suits who you are. And that can be hard to find. You may not even know what situation is your best. And that's why we push the edges. Push the edges, see what happens. Maybe there's a fantastically better version of yourself on the other side of something you're a little afraid of. There might be, there might not be, but you won't know until you go there. Yeah.
It did feel like during the book you are constantly fighting a primal urge, right? Like that's what it came across to me. Like you're fighting, you're trying to logically talk your way through a primal, I don't know, need
response.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're a guy. You know that feeling, right?
Well, that's the whole book. Maybe that's uncomfortable because of the same reason, right? And that's I think it's a very rare person that could actually, I guess, that doesn't have that masculine response.
You're talking about the overly anger, the full anger, like when the gorilla comes out.
The anger, the deep jealousy, the frustration, the
violence.
Yeah.
Like I just want to beat the hell out of someone. Yeah.
And that's what it just sounded like you were torturing yourself for 10 years. And don't get me wrong, there was obviously good times as well. Yeah. But I mean, the good times must have been peak experience to be able to work through a lot of those.
You're 100% right. And there were more good than bad. Just the bad were really intense, and there were far more good than bad. And I tried to give that balance in the book, and maybe I didn't do it enough. Was what I'm hearing from you. It just seemed like all torture and not a lot of fun.
Well, no, I think that just says more about me, right? Do you think there was any level of masochism in there, like? Or
yes, and I do, and that goes back to the mountain climbing, right? That I did as a younger guy, this extreme alpinism. There's a certain amount of masochism in there, and I just was uniquely suited for this particular journey with this woman because of that. And I'm not saying I'm a masochist, but there's an element of me when I want to suffer through. There's an element of enjoying the suffering a little bit if I know it's going to get me somewhere. If it's just suffering for the sake of suffering, no, I'm not interested in that. But if I think that there's a journey, the suffering then becomes really interesting to me.
Do you think naturally people get comfortable as they get older and stop seeking the risk? I mean, that was one of the other things that I thought was very inspiring, right? It's I'm 35. I'm quite a bit younger than you. Not making any statements, but
I'm 55 now. I was 40 when the book starts. So
yeah. I mean, in some ways, it made me realize my own level of comfort and complacency as I got older, right? And I almost, you almost think like that's the natural way things go, and life gets boring the older you get. But I mean, you're a great example of how that doesn't need to be the case.
Thank you, and that's wonderful to hear that you've taken that from what I've written, and yes, I would. It doesn't have to get boring, and so many people do, but it's a fight. It's not easy. Like this, it's a constant fight, and you constantly have to check yourself, and you constantly have to be aware. It's like, hey, am I being all I can be? Am I going where I want to go, or am I just starting to sit back because it's easy, right?
Yeah,
like. So yeah, as long as you never stop asking yourself that question, that's good.
But I mean, it's not like that when we're younger, right? We're just balls of energy, and as we get older and older, I think we need to get more conscious about whether we're kind of letting life drag us down or whether we are living the life we were given, right?
Exactly, 100%. Are we living or are we just existing? I never want to just exist. I always want to live.
Yeah. And I think it's constantly, it's worth constantly reflecting on that and where you are in that cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the introspection and that's the self-awareness. And certainly as men, I think we need to, it's a hard thing for us to do. And we have to consciously do it and really remind ourselves, hey, are you doing everything you can? Are you okay?
Yeah. Adam, thanks so much.
Luke, this has been a real pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome.